What's going on, guys? It's Zach here. Bring guys with a fantasy football video. That's what I'm going to go over my top waiver wire targets ahead of Week 7. It's been a really exciting first 5 weeks in the NFL. Hopefully, you guys have really had a good start to your fantasy football seasons. We're about halfway through the regular season, and at this point, you're sort of at that point where you guys are probably either in a spot where you're sort of starting to look towards those playoffs, try and maximize your roster's potential for those like 3 weeks, and then some of you guys are maybe 1-5, 2-4, and you guys are at the spot where you guys really need to start buying wins. So wherever you're at, waivers is a really good way to help make your team better week over week. Really good way to find guys to fill holes. We see plenty of players come in and fill massive roles off the waiver wire and perform at a really high level. We saw Chuba Hubbard put up a really quality performance last week, for example, and we've obviously had guys like Kyron Williams, Devon Chan so far this season that have been really massive hits so far. Um, it's been really exciting. Obviously, we had a ton of injuries and a lot of just really injuries across the entire board, across the entire league this last week. On top of that, it was a really low-scoring game as well. I believe we only had 2 teams score more than 26 points this week. Normally, we average like around 8 to 12 per week, so really low-scoring game. So if your fantasy team really disappointed last week, don't panic by any means. It was a really low-scoring week across the NFL. Should certainly be something that we need to take into account, but not something that we need to panic about. So yeah, the waiver wire should be pretty good this week. If you guys have any players that I don't mention or any specific start or add drop questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. I love helping you guys go through waivers and get those set, and then hopefully we can do our best to make sure your team's all set for Week 7. So yeah, with that, let's just get into the next get into the quarterbacks here. So starting us off with the quarterback position, I'll start things off with Sam Howell. He's been really quality over the first 6 weeks of the season. He's looked, honestly, like a competent professional NFL quarterback. We know how good those weapons are around him. And he's got a really plus matchup in Week 7 against the New York Giants. Certainly a matchup that can be exploited. Like I said earlier, he's got elite pass catching weapons, and last week was a game where he really didn't need him to perform at a really high level. He only threw the ball 23 times, and he was still okay for fantasy. The Giants should be a little bit better on offense. They'll have Saquon Barkley and probably Daniel Jones, and it's also possible they get their left tackle Thomas back as well. So we could see this Giants offense take a bit of a step forward and be a little bit more competitive. And again, their defense is not nearly as good as we saw it be this last week. So you can use Sam Howell, Joshua Dobbs, another really quality streaming option as well. They play the Seattle Seahawks this week, who give up a lot of points to the opposing quarterback position. I know their secondary has been relatively good so far, so it's a little bit of a scarier proposition here, but Joshua Dobbs does offer quite a bit on the ground as well with his rushing ability. You could do a lot worse than Joshua Dobbs. I wouldn't love it, but he'll probably get you 15 or 20 points, and he won't be the reason you lose, so you can play him if you want to. And then Derek Carr would be another option. He threw for about 350 passing yards this last week. The shoulder looks to be mostly healed up, and that's really promising, especially for our Chris Olave shares here, but this offense is an offense that obviously hasn't done a whole lot so far this season. They only scored 13 points this last week, so I know it's not special, but he does have really good pass-catching weapons with, obviously, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed. Alvin Kamara looks really involved as well, so you could certainly use Derek Carr in what should be a plus matchup against the Jaguars this week. Keep an eye on Trevor Lawrence's availability for Thursday, though. If Lawrence doesn't suit up, this could be a game that the Saints don't really need to put up a lot of points in, then obviously I'd be less excited about Derek Carr here. At running back, this is where we get a really big list here, so keep an eye out. I know a lot of you guys probably dealt with some injuries. There were some really key injuries across the board at the running back position. We lost guys like Christian McCaffrey. We saw David Montgomery go down with injury. Kyron Williams left the game early with an injury. So there's a lot of running backs that we're going to see here really be needed for guys, and obviously there's been a lot of injuries, and we've all got 6 teams on bye in Week 7, so plenty of you guys are going to be really thin at running back. I'm sure if you look across your leagues, if it's not you, there are several teams in your league that need running backs really badly, so this is going to be a really important section here. The 2 priority ads for me would be Jordan Mason or Elijah Mitchell. I do lean Jordan Mason over Elijah Mitchell. We don't really know exactly how long Christian McCaffrey is going to be out. I saw a report that it could be about a 2-week injury, and that sort of makes sense given they've got a Week 9 bye. It wouldn't shock me to see Christian McCaffrey miss the next 2 weeks and then obviously come back in Week 10. They've got relatively easy matchups as well. They play the Vikings this week on Monday Night Football. That could certainly be a situation where they don't need to lean on any of their studs. They should probably win that game pretty easily regardless. So I think Jordan Mason could be in line for a big workload. Their head coach Kyle Shanahan did mention that Jordan Mason being the immediate backup could have had a lot to do with Elijah Mitchell coming back from injury and not being fully 100% this last week. So it's probably going to be about a 50-50 timeshare in Week 7 if Christian McCaffrey misses. But I think Jordan Mason's just honestly looked really good. He's more likely to stay healthy. We know Elijah Mitchell just doesn't seem to be able to withstand very much of a workload without going down. So I think both of them are worth priority ads. Jordan Mason's probably more available across leagues as well. Elijah Mitchell tends to be a guy that gets sort of stashed as a handcuff. So you can certainly pick up both of them. And especially if you're the Christian McCaffrey manager, I'd probably definitely be targeting one of those 2. After that, Roschon Johnson would be my next favorite add. I know the Bears did lose Justin Fields to injury this last week, so the offense is obviously going to take a huge step back. But Deontay Foreman didn't get the lion's share of the workload that we thought he might. We saw Darrington Evans be really involved for this team, and really what that says to me is that Roschon Johnson's going to be the feature guy while Khalil Herbert's back, or while Khalil Herbert is out, and while Roschon Johnson comes back from his concussion. This means you're going to get a really talented player. I think Roschon Johnson's a really talented running back, and in what should be a pretty featured role and should be utilized as a pass catcher as well. So Roschon Johnson can easily be like a low-end running back too, a fill-in for you guys if you need him. And it's possible that he's on waivers. He probably was a really high priority pickup last week, but it's possible that somebody picked him up, saw that he was concussed and wasn't going to play, and then ended up dropping him. So just check your waiver wire. I know he's probably rostered. He's rostered in like just over 40% of leagues, so it's likely that if you're in a competitive league, he's probably already rostered. Take a look there. Craig Reynolds would be the next guy I'd want to be adding here. We saw, as I mentioned earlier, David Montgomery left the game with a rib injury. Head coach Dan Campbell came out and said he's going to miss some time. Again, another similar situation to Christian McCaffrey. The Lions do have a Week 9 bye, so we could very easily see David Montgomery take the next 2 weeks off, have that Week 9 bye, and then come back fully healthy in Week 10, and that's probably what I'm going to expect to happen. Obviously, we don't have any real further or official diagnosis or anything like that, so we'll learn more as the week goes on about David Montgomery, but I'm going to expect him to miss the next 2 weeks, and if that's the case, then Craig Reynolds is going to be the thumper for this offense. We know that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be involved as well once he's back from his injury, which should be as early as this week. But Craig Reynolds is a guy they do really like. They want to use him between the tackles. If you watch the Lions game as well, he laid a really nasty block for Amon-Ra St. Brown on his touchdown. And he's just a guy the Lions do like. I think he's a decent player. He's not special by any means, but he's going to be on the field for quite a bit. He'll probably see 15-ish touches, and what should be a really good offense. So I think you can actually count on picking up Craig Reynolds and playing him. He's like a really low-end running back too. You're hoping he scores a touchdown. He's not going to be super efficient, but you can play him. He's someone that could certainly help you through a bye week, especially if you're the Dave Montgomery manager. It makes sense to roster him if you can. After that, I think my priority ad would be Chuba Hubbard. We saw Chuba Hubbard perform really admirably for the Panthers in Week 6 against the Miami Dolphins. Hubbard will be on bye this week going into Week 7. But after that, in Week 8, there's a legitimate chance that he ends up being the starting running back for this team. Miles Sanders has not looked good so far this season. I know he's dealing with a groin and shoulder injury, so hopefully Miles Sanders comes back and he's himself and looks like a really talented running back again, because I was actually pretty high on Miles Sanders coming into the season. I do think Miles Sanders, when he's himself, is a really talented player and should be the lead back in that offense, but Chuba has looked better so far this season. This is an offense that really does need to utilize their running backs a little bit more. Bryce Young has struggled quite a bit, and they've got the bye coming up now, so they should have time to implement new changes. If there's going to be a shift in that backfield after the bye, would be a great opportunity for that to happen. And if Miles Sanders continues to miss time, he'll be really useful as well. So Chuba absolutely needs to be on rosters. After that, Jeff Wilson will be my next favorite ad. We're not really sure what's going to happen there with his injury. We thought he might come back last week in Week 6, and he wasn't able to suit up, and Salvon Ahmed ended up getting the majority of the work behind Raheem Mostert. But if Jeff Wilson does come back, we saw last year this ended up being pretty close to a 50-50 timeshare when they were both healthy. Obviously, Raheem Mostert's just been way too talented so far this season for that to end up happening, but you could see a situation where Jeff Wilson gets 30% of the snaps, and if that happened, he'd be like a low-end starting option for you guys. Not someone you'd be confident in week over week, but certainly someone that you could hope scores a touchdown. And obviously with this offense, there's a lot of touchdown opportunity. I think Raheem Mostert has 11 touchdowns already on the season. That is absolutely insane for a 31-year-old running back only 6 weeks through the season. So obviously there's a lot of opportunity in this offense. You could do a lot worse than Jeff Wilson, and he does need to be on rosters just to see how things pan out. Devin Singletary is someone else that I'd be looking to add. We saw him actually outsnap Dameon Pierce this last week. He's played 54% of the snaps compared to the Dameon Pierce's 33%. He is also the primary running back they utilize in pass catching situations, and this is something we were really worried about. I talked about it a lot all offseason, how I really didn't think Dameon Pierce would end up being a high-end performer for you guys, just because I think Devin Singletary is actually a talented running back. He's not going to be the guy that operates as their pass-catching running back, and then Dameon Pierce is not going to be super efficient with this running back, this offensive line as well. So Devin Singletary is a guy that should be rostered. If he's going to be the primary running back in this offense, I don't know if that's something we can really count on. Obviously, it was just 1 week, so I want to see what happens after the bye. But Singletary is a guy that's involved enough in a pretty good offense, and he'll catch a few passes as well. So you could certainly do a lot worse than him. He should be on rosters to see how things shake out. And he's a guy that you could play as like a desperation running back too, and I'm sure a lot of us are in need of that desperation running back too at this point in time. So he can be on rosters for sure. Keontae Ingram operated as the main running back for the Arizona Cardinals this week. That was something that we were a little bit shocked about. I know he was listed as the primary running back on the depth chart, but Amari DeMercado did seem like he was in line to at least be the pass catching running back. But the Cardinals ended up utilizing three running backs in DeMercado, Damian Williams, and Keontae Ingram. It's a really gross situation. They play a relatively decent run defense in Seattle this week, so it's not something that I'm super excited about. But you could play Keontae Ingram. He'll probably see 10 to 15 touches in a game against a mediocre defense, and 10 to 15 touches, sometimes that's all we can hope for, and just hope he falls in the end zone. So Ingram should be on rosters, and if you're in a really deep league, you can play him, but he's not someone that I'm excited about, and honestly, we're probably just waiting for James Conner to come back before we see real value out of this Cardinals backfield. Kareem Hunt honestly looked really good, sort of, the Cleveland Browns this last week. He scored a touchdown in this one, played about 50% of the snaps, so it's a pretty even split between Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, and we're seeing Kareem Hunt sort of play himself back into football shape. We could see him certainly become more and more useful for the Cleveland Browns as the season goes on, so I think Kareem Hunt needs to be on rosters. We've seen him perform at a high level in the past. He's definitely got a nose for the end zone as well, and this Browns offense should get a little bit better when Deshaun Watson comes back, so Kareem Hunt should be on rosters. Zach Evans, if you do need to start this week, I think you could do a lot worse than Zach Evans. Obviously, he just didn't look good this last week. He looked like he was in over his head in week 6 after Kyren Williams left the game with an injury. We also saw Ronnie Rivers leave the game with an injury as well. Ronnie Rivers is going to miss about a month or so, so Rivers is going to probably be put on IR. This would be somebody that we can forget about going forward. But Kyren Williams, he's got an ankle injury. He'll probably miss this week and maybe one more week. And while that's happening, you're going to have Royce Freeman and Zach Evans being the only two healthy running backs in Los Angeles. Zach Evans will probably get the first crack at it, although Royce Freeman is the better pass protector. He'll probably see the field about just as much. So I'm not super confident in either one of these guys. They've got a pretty stingy run defense matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. It's not a defense that I'm excited about playing running backs against, and obviously this is going to be a super pass-heavy team in the Rams, so it's not something that I'm excited about, but they should see 10-ish touches, both Zach Evans and Royce Freeman, who I forgot to list here, but they're not something that I'm super excited about, but if you need a start, you could pick them up and play them if you absolutely have to. And then lastly, I want to talk about Latavius Murray. He continues to be really involved for the Buffalo Bills. I know he's not a sexy name. James Cook is by far the most talented running back on this offense, and definitely the running back we want to own for fantasy, but we did see Damian Harris go down to a really scary injury this last week. Sounds like he's okay. That's really good to hear, but I'd be shocked to see Damian Harris play this week, so you're going to look at a backfield that will be just two guys, Latavius Murray and James Cook. Obviously, Latavius Murray is going to operate as the goal line back, and he's the guy that they prefer in pass protection as well, so he's got a shot to catch a couple passes, will get goal line work, and they're playing a really bad defense in New England this week. So there's certainly an opportunity here for this to be a blowout game, a game where the Bills sort of try and get right and just get their offense back on track after a really brutal performance against the Giants this last week. So Latavius Murray could be on rosters. I've got a league where I lost David Montgomery and I have Dameon Pierce on bye. I went pretty much RB0, so I might be looking at starting Latavius Murray this week. I'm not opposed to doing it. I do think he's got a good shot to score in week 7, so he should be on rosters as well, especially if you need to start this week. Up next, we've got the wide receiver position. There's actually a couple names that I do think are going to be pretty relevant here. My number one waiver ad, and he's someone I've talked about a little bit already this regular season, that'd be Rashee Rice. We've seen him really continuously step up in that Chiefs offense. He seems to be pretty clearly the number one wide receiver in that offense in terms of talent. He's done the most with the opportunities given to him. They use him near the goal line a ton. He put up 4 for 72 last week, and he just seems like he's a good player. We saw Justin Watson as well go down with an elbow injury. That's going to keep him sidelined for probably about a month, so just a little bit less of a condensed target tree in that offense. Hopefully, eventually, we see Rashee Rice sort of become a, 60 to 80% snap share player, and that would give him a very legitimate opportunity to be a meaningful contributor in that offense and someone that you could probably be starting going forward. So I don't think we're quite there with Rashee Rice yet, but he should be on rosters, and if you needed to play him as a flex, you could do a lot worse there. Next would be Wan'Dale Robinson, another guy I've talked about a lot lately. He continues to be really involved with this Giants offense. He had 8 catches for 64 yards yesterday against the Buffalo Bills. He just seems to be the player that they really want to get the ball to near the line of scrimmage. They really do script passes for him. He gets wide receiver screens. They're using him all over the field, out of the backfield a little bit. He's just a good player. He can do a lot with the ball in his hands after the catch. And it seems like he's just sort of getting healthier and healthier as well, coming off of that ACL injury. He is the wide receiver you want to own in New York. Maybe Darius Slayton has some flex appeal in deeper leagues as well, but Wan'Dale Robinson should be rostered. I do think he's a guy that, especially in PPR formats, you can play and get 10 points out of, and sometimes 10 points is just really useful, and he should certainly be rostered. Next, Curtis Samuel just continues to perform at a high level. He scored again this last week. He's just been really good for them. I think he's a little legitimate wide receiver 3 or 4, a guy that, especially in PPR formats, you can play, and honestly, he's probably the wide receiver 2 in Washington ahead of Jahan Dotson right now. I know that's not exactly what a lot of us were hoping for, but Curtis Samuel's a good player. They use him quite a bit. Sam Howell clearly likes him. Curtis Samuel does need to be on rosters, and if he happens to still be on your waiver wire, you can certainly pick him up and you can play him as like a pretty useful flex option. Josh Downs got it done again this last week, although it wasn't as exciting as we would have thought, but he did get in the end zone against the Jaguars. He is pretty clearly the number 2 wide receiver in this offense behind Michael Pittman. With Gardner Minshew under center, they're going to throw the ball a lot more than they were going to with Anthony Richardson, and it sounds like Anthony Richardson's going to be out the entire rest of the year. That's a huge bummer for Anthony Richardson and the Colts, but it does open up a legitimate opportunity for the pass catchers in this offense. Josh Downs should be rostered, especially in flex or in PPR formats. You can use him as a flex option. Jameson Williams, we finally saw him break loose for a big, huge touchdown this last week. Ended up catching 2 passes for 53 yards and a touchdown. He's still a big unknown for me. I don't know how talented he is. If you have him and you want to sell high on him, you certainly can. In a league where I'm super running back needy on, I flipped him for Dameon Pierce. So obviously, I'm not Dameon Pierce being someone I'm super excited about, but a guy that you could use. But I do think that Jameson Williams is a guy that we saw that really high draft capital for him last year. He should be an extremely talented player. He is a piece that this Lions offense really does need. They need an asset that can take the top off of the defense. Obviously, with Amon-Ra, Josh Reynolds, and Sam Laporta operating underneath, having Jameson Williams be able to take the top off should open up things a lot for them. On top of that, we know that Montgomery's banged up for the next couple of weeks. Jahmyr Gibbs has been banged up. So this might be a Lions offense that has to air it out quite a bit. We could see some good things for Jameson Williams going forward. So if you want to look at him, he should probably be on rosters. He's maybe rostered already, but if he's not, you should probably be looking at him and stashing him. Not someone I'm confident starting in, but if we see one more good week of him, maybe he gets involved a little bit more, see that snap share jump, he could certainly be a guy that you can use. Kendrick Bourne put up his second big game of the season so far. Honestly, the only 2 games of the season where the Patriots looked like a competent offense, they were featuring Kendrick Bourne as the number 1 wide receiver. I do think he is pretty clearly the number 1 wide receiver in terms of talent on this Patriots offense. Obviously, it's not an offense that we want a huge part of, but Kendrick Bourne does seem to be good enough. If they're going to use him like this, he's a guy that should be rostered and a guy that could be played, and plus matchups against defenses that maybe don't scare you so much. Rashid Shaheed got it done this last week. He had 2 catches for 85 yards. His second catch was like a 50-yard catch. He just mossed the guy. Really exciting player. I do like Rashid Shaheed quite a bit from a talent standpoint. And I know he's probably the number 3 wide receiver on the Saints offense. He's not someone that we want to trust on a week-to-week basis. But if you find yourself in a matchup where maybe you're a significant underdog, you want to go for a little bit of upside in your flex spot, Rashid Shaheed could crack your lineup. We know how explosive he is. He could easily have a couple games where he goes for 3 for 102. He's just a really talented player. He's a really legitimate deep threat. He's a guy that does need to be on rosters, and he can certainly be used in flex format in a flex spot in like bye week situations. And then lastly, I want to bring up Marvin Mims again. I know he had his career low in snaps last week for only running 12 routes, or only playing 12 snaps, in fact. But sooner or later, this Broncos roster is going to change. They're going to trade Jerry Jeudy and or Courtland Sutton. I think Jerry Judy's pretty much out the door already. Courtland Sutton seems like he could certainly be moved as well, and that's going to open up an opportunity for Marvin Mims. It's really silly of the Broncos to not be playing Marvin Mims every single snap at this point. He's by far their most talented wide receiver, it seems, on a per-snap basis. I really do want to see him get on the field a ton. I think he's got a lot of opportunity to really be a meaningful contributor for them, and once he gets that snap share, I think he's going to be a guy that we could actually rely on in fantasy. So hold on to him and just wait for that. If he ends up being the clear wide receiver 1 or 2 in this offense, he's going to be fantasy relevant, so he needs to be rostered for sure. Next, a tight end position. We've got Dalton Schultz as my number 1 ad here. I know Dalton Schultz was not really relevant for the first 4 weeks of the season, but the last 2 weeks have been really involved for the Houston Texans. I know that does sort of line up with Tank Dell getting banged up due to injury, but he's been good so far. He's a guy that does need to be on rosters, and honestly, he's a talented player. I know they're on a bye this week, but that means he could easily get dropped or sort of slide under the radar. But he's a player that could easily be like number 2 or number 3 in this offense in targets. He's got a secure rule. We know C.J. Stroud's looked really good so far as well, so Dalton Schultz should be on rosters as a guy that you can actually play and stream at the tight end position if you need to. Jonnu Smith continues to get it done for the Falcons. They just continue to throw the ball to the tight ends a ton. Both tight ends in this offense are getting a ton of targets, and Jonnu Smith honestly seems to get more targets closer to the line of scrimmage, makes his role a little bit more reliable than Kyle Pitts, so Jonnu Smith can certainly be rostered. You can play him, especially in PPR formats. Michael Mayer sort of had his coming out party. I believe he had 5 for 75 this last week for the Raiders. They talked a lot about wanting to utilize their tight ends more in this offense, and we saw that. I don't know for sure if it's exactly correlated to Davante Adams being injured with that shoulder injury. It really doesn't look like Davante Adams is completely himself just yet, so that has opened up more opportunities for the other pass catchers. We also know that Jimmy Garoppolo got injured with his back injury, had to go to the hospital. We're probably going to see Brian Hoyer for at least a week or 2, and that does limit the upside for this offense, but Michael Mayer should still be rostered, I think, especially in deeper leagues. He's a guy that, at the tight end position, he's a second-round draft pick. I know rookie tight ends are never super reliable outside of apparently Sam Laporta, but Mayer's a talented player. He could be forced into a pretty focal point in this offense, so he should probably be at least on your radar. Luke Musgrave, I know we haven't seen the big game yet for him, but I think it's coming. They utilize him down the field quite a bit. They need him to be an integral part of this offense, and they got a really great matchup this week against the Denver Broncos. So if you want to play a tight end, stream him. I think you could do a lot worse than Luke Musgrave. Jake Ferguson had a bit of a down week again this last week. Only had, I believe, one catch against the Los Angeles Chargers. That's a bit of a bummer, but we know how much they utilize him in the red zone. He's been a focal point for them there. He's a good player. There's just too integral of a part of this offense. They're going to be on bye this week, so he's either probably already on waivers or he could easily get dropped this week. And I think he's a guy that does need to remain rostered. So if he gets dropped, make sure you pick him up. Then Logan Thomas. I know he only put up 1.2 fantasy points this last week. Put up a bit of a dud in a matchup that we really thought he could exploit, but Logan Thomas continues to be an important part of this Commanders offense. We know how bad the tight end position is, and Logan Thomas is integral enough to this Commanders offense that he should be rostered and a guy that you can consider playing in good matchups. And last but certainly not least, we got some defense streamers for you guys. My number one option here would be the Cleveland Browns. They just shut down the number one offense in the NFL in the San Francisco 49ers. They were coming off of their bye week as well, and against this tough matchup, they maybe either got dropped after week 4, didn't get picked up after their bye, or maybe they just got dropped going into last week. I know that they don't necessarily have a great matchup, a great stretch of matchups coming forward. They obviously the Indianapolis Colts this next week, who aren't fantastic by any means, though, so it's a good matchup. And the Cleveland Browns might just be so legitimately good that you can rely on them against almost any matchup. So they need to be rostered. It could give you a lot of flexibility going forward. Up next would be the Atlanta Falcons for me. They have a decent matchup this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That doesn't scare me at all. In the following week, they get to play the Tennessee Titans after their bye. The Tennessee Titans will probably still be leading on Malik Willis, who obviously, if you watched the London game last week, can't avoid a sack at all. So the Atlanta Falcons could be a nice 2-week rental for you guys here. The Las Vegas Raiders should be rostered as well. They put up a decent defensive performance against the Patriots this last week. They play the Chicago Bears this next week, who will be without Justin Fields. There's nothing on that offense that scares you anymore, so the Raiders could definitely be in play for a big game. And the Seattle Seahawks, they were decent on defense against the Bengals this last week. They play the Arizona Cardinals this week, who obviously aren't going to take the top off of you. They're not someone that super really scares you from an offensive side of the ball. So the Seahawks could be in line for a pretty safe play at the defensive position if you want to. So yeah, that'll do it for the defenses, though. Nothing super special this week. So that'll do it for this week's version of the waiver wire video. Up next, tomorrow, you guys will be getting my trade targets video where I go over players I'm looking to buy low and sell high on ahead of week 7. It's been a super exciting first 6 weeks of the NFL so far. Obviously, at this point, we're sort of in do or die mode for a lot of your guys' fantasy teams. If you're 1-5, 2-4, we really do need to start stacking wins, and either making some really key waiver moves or making a big trade is going to be important to doing that. And I'll be here all season long to help you guys navigate that. If you're 3-3, 4-2, 5-1, you really want to start stacking wins, start looking towards those playoffs, and get yourself set up for making a really quality playoff push. So I'll be here all regular season long, putting out 4 to 5 videos every single week, making sure we can get you guys set to win your matchups each week, and then hopefully get you through those fantasy playoffs and get you guys some fantasy championships. So if you want access to all these videos, all you've got to do is subscribe to the channel. We're at like 890 subscribers right now. It was really cool to see a bit of a jump last week. I would love to hit 1,000 by the end of the NFL season. That means we need about 10 more each week, so I really do think we can get there. If you haven't subscribed already, I know a lot of you guys watch these videos and haven't subscribed. Just subscribe to the video. It really helps me out. Really appreciate all the support you guys have given. If you've already subscribed to the channel, just give the video a thumbs up as well. Give the video a thumbs up even if you're not going to subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. It helps me know that I'm doing a good job, and hopefully it shows me that you guys want more content like this. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time with a trade video. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.